The late great Steve Jobs once said that great things in business are never done by a single person, they're done by teams of people. And this makes it really important that if you're planning on doing a startup, you got to get that team right. Hi, and welcome back. My name is Drews McFarland.
And I'm John Duran.
John, you've had a lot of experience with a lot of different startups. What are talented resources looking for today?
So, it's kind of changed over time. I would say back when I first got into the technology industry, folks were really mostly just looking for a great paycheck. It really didn't matter because most jobs are kind of the same and that was really the driving factor. Maslow has actually done some study and published Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where he really says, humans are searching for a few basic things. Obviously, they need food, water, shelter. But one of the things he uncovered in his research is that people really want to have a purpose. They want their job to be aligned with a purpose. And I think it's important. We've reached that point where many of the most talented engineers and technical folks that I work with, and obviously we're talking about technical related startups, they're looking to find a place where they can actually align to both the culture, the vision of the company, and the mission, where they feel like they are actually participating and providing value around that mission. And in many cases, I won't say that it's going to displace a paycheck by any stretch, but it can be more important that you set that right tone and you match the person to what you're trying to do, and you'll find that the talent's kind of drawn to that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been my experience that, with as competitive as the entire industry is, that getting the money is usually something that every organization can end up doing. And if you're looking for somebody where that's the sole criteria, they're probably not necessarily they're not necessarily the best fit for the organization. So you really want to look for that person who has the capability of looking and choosing from different organizations and trying to do a cultural fit more than just a financial one.
Absolutely. And I would say, some of the things I've seen even in the last few years with the, work from home initiatives and things like that have been forced on us in many cases. Even some of the things that Maslow has talked about have changed slightly. So people really want to be respected. That's, we would expect that, but they want to be heard as well, acknowledged and heard. And they want to have an opportunity to grow and excel with the recognition of the efforts that they provide. And we'll talk a little bit more about recognition later. It's really kind of important in how this goes. And I think those are some of the most important things to understand when you start looking for talent is how do you create an environment that attracts the right people? Because you're going to need the right people to be successful.
Yeah. And that's one of the nice things also that a startup is often going to be able to offer is, when you're still a small, tight-knit organization, they're going to have more say. They're going to have more influence into the corporate culture. They're going to be, there from the ground up, which is again a reason why you really want to do that initial hire, those initial hires really, really carefully, because you're setting a precedent for everybody else. The culture often has a tendency of trickling from the top down. So as you're especially filling those top spots, you're going to attract people because they will have that say, but you want to make sure that that say is something that's in keeping with the rest of your organization. So that brings us to another question here, which is, like, once you've figured that out, how do you find those people? Because it's a very competitive market out there.
Oh, competitive is boy the key word, and in our recent history here, over maybe in the last 12 months, we've been through the Great Resignation, which has really been indicative of people are chasing the job they want, and those jobs are out there. So it's a competitive market. You have to be prepared. So there's a number of ways to find good talent, but if you're starting a company, you're going to be a little bit more challenged. You're going to have to get creative in how you search for that talent. It's probably not a monster.com job. We've talked in a previous discussion about advisors and mentorship. That's a great place to start. Chances are, if you're talking with someone who started a company before, they may know how to get a hold of a couple of those resources, may even have some that they could point you to as great references. And then your own network. I mean, you probably have a social media network. You probably have folks outside of work. I don't recommend recruiting where you currently work. That's usually considered a bad idea. But in your network of folks, maybe in partners and peers and other businesses that you interact with, there's a good chance you may find some there as well. And then, Druce, we've been talking this whole thing's about venture capitalists and how to get money, where that money comes from, how to deal with the money. Those are some big pieces as well. I'll let you address that piece.
Yeah, and just for the record, because having done a couple of startups, I've never poached employees from the place I used to work. So never, it's something I've never done. So no, and you sort of bring up a really good point here, because obviously when you're venture capitalists are good. They're going to be able to help you. When you start looking for VCs or angels, you're hoping that they're smart money and hoping that they've got a Rolodex of good talent that they can direct you to as well. And all that is highly important. There is a blessing and a curse throughout the industry that a lot of the recruiting capabilities that you've seen show up in the last 5 years have been highly automated. You get these things that can go through and they can search through resumes and weed out a whole bunch of things. So you can only really get the resumes that you're looking for. As somebody looking for a job or somebody who's trying to hire for a job, the problem is that those very filters can often filter out really good people. It's potentially filtering you out from the jobs that you want, but it's also potentially filtering out really good talent because you made some requirement that was a deal killer, so to speak. But boy, this one person didn't have that, but he had so much else that it would have been really valuable. This is why it's really important to go through your networks to be able to find people, because if you have somebody that's worked with somebody before that can stand by and be a reference for that person, those are often the better hires that you get than as you said, than the people that you're going to get through Monster.com. Work your social networks, work your VCs, work your advisors, try to find those people. They're always going to end up being a really good source over and above what you're going to get through a filtered list that you're getting from Indeed.com or whatever the filtering mechanism that you're going to end up using. Once you've gone from that standpoint, you've got these people there. How do you keep them?
Well, retaining talent's an interesting concept because number one, and we'll talk about this in a moment, occasionally you're going to run across the bad talent and you're going to have to deal with that too. But for those that you do want to keep on staff, there's a couple of important notes here. First is, let me refer you back to an earlier episode that we covered over culture and how to set a culture in your organization. It's very important that you model the behaviors and the attitudes that you want your team members to have, because that's going to help set the tone. And if you're modeling a really good culture, there's a lot of folks, a lot of good, talented folks that will stay with a company because the culture is really important to them. So setting that good culture is I would say, one of the most critical things you could possibly do. The second thing that I've seen work extremely well is through just having a recognition program, being quick to recognize folks who are contributing in really great ways or doing things, but also, and this is a little bit of a two-edged sword, be careful not to recognize individuals too much because you don't want to create, the one person teams. You want to make sure that you're recognizing the efforts as it aligns to teamwork, as it aligns to being a part of the organization, as it aligns to helping the mission move forward, etc. So recognition is good. And one of the things that there's a lot of surveys out there on this topic, but you'll find good, well-designed recognition programs can actually do better at retention than financial bonus programs. And that can work in your favor long-term. So keep that in mind. Take the time to create and set a good culture and recognize your team members for their contributions. And I think you'll see really, really positive results out of that. But when it doesn't work, when you have the bad hire, when you made a bad hiring decision, and let me say this, I've loved this comment. I've had it and I've used it for most of my business career. If you find yourself having to manage an employee, you've made a hiring mistake. So keep that in mind. But when that happens, when you have a hiring mistake, there's some things that you really need to do quickly to address that. And you know, Drews and I have been doing some research on some of those aspects, things that come up with toxic employees, or how to deal with some employees maybe that are definitely not your top performers.
No, I've unfortunately, like it's amazing, and I can't overstress this how important it is that you don't have people who are toxic inside of your environment. It will bring down the performance of everybody, everybody in the team. And I've been, I'll tell a story without naming names, but I did a startup at one point in time where, this was really early on, and we, everybody that was at this, because we're still early in stealth, we hadn't gotten funding or anything like that, and everybody there was working for free. And we had this developer who was working for us for free, but he was a problem, and we struggled with that because, like, he's free. Why? It's not like he's costing us anything. Well, he ultimately was going to be costing us money, but he's got to be more productive than not having him there at all. And eventually, we just couldn't deal with it anymore. We did have to let him go. And what we didn't realize is that the productivity of everybody suddenly skyrocketed because everybody was shouldering the burden that this guy was putting on him. And as a result, just like sometimes having nobody is better than having the wrong person. It's you can't emphasize that that enough. And on the performance versus versus toxicity level, there was actually a really interesting study I saw recently. If you don't mind me going into this, but there's something that was done by the Navy SEALs where they think about like this magic quadrant, and I'm going to put it like right over here. Or nope, wrong one. Right over here. This magic quadrant where you have on the x-axis trust, and you have on the y-axis performance. And so the performance level is how good are they at their job. The trust level is literally, would you trust this person with your wife? And obviously, what you want is somebody in that upper right-hand corner. The high-performing, high-trust individuals are what you want. There are very few of those people that are actually out there.
We call those unicorns.
Yes. Now, with the Navy SEALs, what they would prefer, as a second choice, in the high trust, low performance, it was actually their second choice. They would prefer to have somebody who wasn't as well performing, but somebody that was trustworthy, versus the other side, which is something a lot more common, where you have people who are very high performing, but they're also have a tendency of being a bit toxic, and there's a lot of reasons for why that ends up being. Sometimes they're high performing because they're driven by insecurity, but they'll push that insecurity off on everybody else inside the organization. These are people who are going to do well on their own at the expense of everybody around them. So you really don't want those people around them. So that is the third choice in terms of the Navy SEAL. They don't want those people around, and they would much prefer having the person who doesn't perform as well, but is somebody that is going to have your back. Now the problem is in corporate America, in the enterprise, it's usually the other way around. They will tend to promote and advance the people who are high performers, even if they're toxic, because they're performing well, and that ends up having an impact on their entire rest of the organization. So it's an interesting way of looking at the problem, and it's certainly changed my outlook on how that works.
If in your organization, one of the roles you end up hiring for is more of a sales focused role, there's a great book out there called The Challenger Sell that actually helps you kind of identify different types of sales personalities. And one that often comes up in, just as Drews described, the lone wolf. They have a tendency to create scorched earth methods to get things done, which leaves a lot of problem in their wake, but they're extremely high performers. And you find those in a lot of sales organizations. You find a lot of lone wolves. It can be a bit toxic. They create problems. So as he said, it's really important. You look for the things that move toward your personality, your culture, that are driving your mission forward. And as he said, most desirable probably and most likely to find would be the folks who have a high degree of trust and are at least acceptable in performance, because you can always increase and improve performance with employees. it's very, very difficult to fix or repair trust issues. Today's episode, we've covered just really kind of hitting a little bit high level on how to find and retain good talent. And we added in there for your benefit what to do with those who maybe aren't good talent. And we hope that this information will benefit you as you start looking for the right people to make your organization grow and succeed the way you want to. We encourage you, if you've got ideas or questions about hiring, about retention, about even how to deal with or how do you coach someone out of your organization? How do you deal with that when you have a bad performer? Drop some ideas and thoughts into the comments here underneath our video. We would love to work with you and talk with you on some of those things and start some dialogue with maybe some of your peers. Find out how others are doing and dealing with these similar issues. So we really appreciate you joining in. Please remember, Druce and I are not lawyers. We don't play lawyers on TV or on podcasts. And we really recommend that regardless of what you do, you make sure you have a lawyer, a real lawyer involved in all the business decision-making process for your organization. And lastly, again, thank you for tuning in. We appreciate your attendance to our show. If what we're saying is resonating with you, is helping maybe challenge some of the challenges you're trying to address with your startup organization, we encourage you to like and subscribe. Thanks again, and join us next time for another episode of the Startup Planner.